Okay, you guys, I am so excited. I have to show this to you. So last week, I got a DM from the Golden Bachelor at ABC. They said, we want to send you something. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? So I got a box from ABC. How exciting is this? Look at my sweatshirt, my little bag, Golden Bachelor, a gold mug that looks like my Love is Blind Golden Bachelor, and a water bottle. Let me read you the note. It says, we wanted to send you this little gift as a thank you for being a fan of the show and posting about it on social. We hope you enjoy the rest of the season as much as we do, the ABC marketing team. I'm going to keep this. So exciting. All my work, posting on Instagram, and here I am to break down this exciting episode. And I want to talk more about the final three and their attachment styles and what we can learn from it. So stay tuned because I want to get personal about this one. Welcome to Reality TV Therapy with me, Dr. Diane. Can you believe it? We are right before hometowns. My gosh, this season is just flying by. I don't know if it is the hour a week that just goes so fast, but there's so many great women, and I'm still sad that I have not seen a single Golden Bachelorette ad. It's like, come on, we have got to do something for these wonderful women. And I'm talking to you, ABC, if you're listening to me, we've got to get them some great men. So let's get to this. Let's start off the evening, and I want to talk about the final three. So, Faith. We've all been waiting. I said last week that Leslie was my front runner, but now I knew that we had to get to Faith. And that was one of the most special one-on-one dates that I think I've ever seen. The helicopter we've seen, the yacht we've seen, but I've never seen in 20 years a helicopter landing on a yacht, unless I've just missed it somehow. So that really was this kind of out of this world or fantasy date. And someone asked me, they said, Dr. Diane, I have not experienced these types of dates, nor have I had that feeling before. I said, well, have you been on The Bachelor? So oftentimes what they do, fascinating enough, is we have these dopamine dates, I call them, like the exhilaration dates, the Charity with Dotton, bungee jumping. They raise your adrenaline, which then increases that feeling, increases the dopamine to have that feeling that you're falling in love. Think about it. Being on a helicopter, and especially if you have a fear, and then on a yacht, it's a little bit different than going to the movies or out for drinks. It is just whole different level. But here's what I'm worried about, okay? Let's talk about attachment styles. So there are four. I'm just going to do a super quick review on the four attachment styles. One is to be secure. What does that mean? It means primarily an attachment styles are developed in the first 2 years of life. Really, the first 5 years of life are critical in terms of your parents and how then you feel, and then how you will feel later in your romantic relationships, how you feel in the world. Number one is secure, meaning my parents were there for me most of the time. They were good enough parents. That way, I cry, I'm a baby, I'm cold, I'm hungry, my diaper is wet. My parents are there, and they're attuned to me. So I feel trusting in the world in romantic relationships later. And secure, functioning children who turn into be secure adults then feel safe in the world, like they trust people. That's not Faith. I'm not saying that. Number two is the anxiously attached person. And I'd alluded to this with Theresa. We're going to get to Theresa. But to me, her little bit needing validation, needing reassurance, getting so excited, kind of getting ahead of herself and not being able to contain it, that feels anxious to me. How does an anxious child develop? Well, an anxious child has a parent who's there for them sometimes, not others. What that means is that their nervous system, and I call this person nervous, my character nervous Nora or Nick, who feels like they're always waiting for the next shoe to drop. Like things are good and I'm kind of allergic to hope, meaning like I look for love and I fall for people quickly, but I'm still skeptical. That to me feels like Theresa and possibly Leslie. But here's the fourth person, and that's Faith. This is called the fearful avoidant person. In classic attachment theory, Dr. John Bowlby said that this person would be disorganized. I don't like the word disorganized or fearful avoidant. It's like, what does that mean? I think this person, I'm just renaming an old classic thing, is confused. A little bit confused about who's safe, who isn't. But here's the clues that lead me to believe that Faith may have a more fearful avoidant / confused attachment style. When she said, so they have this great date. That's all beautiful. That's all wonderful. But now they're talking and she's thrilled. She's over the moon. This is a wonderful date. She's got feelings. They're talking about their connection, and she knew that when she met somebody, she was going to look at them and just have this feeling, kind of very romantic, right? But she talks about the trauma, and when someone uses the word trauma, I trust them on that, and she's old enough. She said,
I had a very hard childhood.
She didn't have a mother and a father. Yikes. That she was a homeless adolescent. I'm like, okay, wow. That she didn't have a home in some ways. And then she says kind of quickly, but I pulled it together. I raised a family. I didn't hear anything about a partner. I don't know if she was married. But here's the classic pattern for someone who is in this type. And she didn't also say, like Leslie did last week, that I don't have a good picker. It's like, I've just never experienced this before. And then she said, sounds like she was alluding to perhaps being with narcissistic people who have wounded or abandoned or hurt her, that they would throw things back at her. And then Gerry says, of course, no, I wouldn't do that. But she's asking questions that are a little bit different than what we've seen. Like, is this real? Can we create a life together? Well, that's always a normal question. But it's the childhood and talking about it not being traditional, the homeless teenage years, that she didn't feel whole. Now, here's the only caveat, because this is a serious, I'm going to say, issue, because it's a wound, not a diagnosis. It's not in the DSM, meaning we don't have a psychological category for this. But it's more like a flavor. It's more like looking at how somebody will approach stress in particular. That she said there's something in her that's not whole, okay? And she glossed over that quickly because, again, this is edited. So has Faith gone to therapy and done her work? If a person has this background and doesn't have parents and then has to create their own like independence, because that's a way that she probably coped, which is just kind of do her own thing. Even though she hasn't had someone, the tricky pattern is this: you get used to that being the pattern, and when someone treats you well, it's almost like you don't know what to do with it. What does that mean? This happens that you want good relationships, but you can't trust them. And sometimes people who are too nice to you bore you. And then you push them away. You sometimes create a little bit of drama. So that's what I'm getting a little bit worried about, quite honestly. Up to this point, we didn't know anything about Faith's background. There's no lack of chemistry here, but Gerry, who's been married for, 43 years, right? He's a solid guy. And is he attracted to Faith because of her woundedness? I'm just going to say. So, I don't know what Gerry's going to do. he's clearly intrigued by Faith. And she has a lot going for her, right? She was different than the woman. She stood out night one. She's on the motorcycle. She's got her guitar. She's singing. She puts her heart out there quickly. And that's the thing. Confused people can fall in love very quickly, but they can flip quickly too. So the question is, if I had known that Faith did some therapy, that she's done her work, that she's become more secure, because that's the whole thing, that we can earn our security, then I'd feel better about this. But if she hasn't, then I'm a little bit worried, to be honest. I'm just a little bit worried. Okay, let's put a pin in that because we don't know Gerry's final choice. And then the question is, can people change? Yes, they can, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. So now while all of this is going on, we've got Leslie melting down. No surprise. Leslie had a great date. I said in my video last week that she really, I said played it well. I don't really mean played it well. She's saying the right kind of notes, the right things in dating to get somebody interested in them. My picker was off. That felt very vulnerable to me. This is what also feels a little bit like an anxious attachment style because she's really taking this hard. She is very intimidated that Faith got like the pretty woman date, so to speak. Like she got the date of a lifetime kind of, and theirs wasn't quite on par there. So she's getting upset.
A lot of feelings watching somebody you potentially could be in love with taking someone on the most romantic date.
Even Ellen's trying to console her, ask her how she's doing. She said, do you have any regrets? And she was a little bit like, no, what do you mean? I don't have any regrets. But it is really hard for her. And yes, she's falling for Gerry. And she also knows that Gerry has a strong connection with Faith. So I get it. And Leslie, I think, has good reason to worry. So all the women are falling for Gerry. I can't blame them. But I think this is happening a little bit harder for her. And she says, and I was thinking of Ariel from Zach's season. So Ariel said it really well. She said, let's just face it, this is like a polyamorous relationship. He's dating all of us because Leslie's bringing up this idea that she's been cheated on before and she knows this isn't cheating, but it still feels the same way, right? You want this person and they haven't chosen you, and that felt really hard. And then she said, she might put her walls up because she could get hurt. Ugh, okay. That's tough. I'm hoping Leslie doesn't, that she stays present because we know that that's what you need to in the process. But I'm just thinking, based upon the things that Leslie has says, I'm crazy about you. Sometimes those are kind of things that anxiously attached people say. Again, these aren't awful things. It's just something that if you can relate to Leslie, and I myself have had an anxious attachment style, needed to work on that for years. This is why I do the work that I do, why I've developed the courses that I have for people to help them feel more secure. And they're all just in the thick of it, right? It is really getting stressful because they're meeting their family. But here's the thing. Now we're on the group date and all the women have time with Gerry. And Gerry does say to Leslie, you're my girl. Because she's, upset, saying she's having a hard time. They kind of kiss. She says she's falling for him. And when he says, you're my girl, I'm like, oh, I think it's going to be Leslie and Faith, top two. Because he didn't say that to Theresa. So let's talk about Theresa. I said, again, has a flavor of anxiety, but Theresa was married and for many years to a consistent person. So Theresa could have been anxious, had a secure relationship, earned her security, and now in dating, she kind of goes back to being more anxious. That's a little bit different presentation than Leslie and with Faith. So of all the people, I actually think Theresa, of those three, feels the most kind of secure for Gerry, but I don't know if I actually see the connection because I think Gerry's getting something out of Faith being wounded. And he's like, I thought you were just a pretty face, but now there's so much more to you. And he has that connection with Leslie too. So what are we saying about Gerry? Does Gerry like perhaps the more wounded person, possibly. Men find that attractive. The idea that I could save you, the idea that I'm going to be the hero, that I'm going to be the first guy who, even later in life, who shows you what love is. That may be going on for Gerry. Okay. But Theresa says, I can't live without you. And I think the timing of that was pretty perfect because we are talking about hometowns. And she can't help herself. She is falling in love with him, and she tells him. And I think we're going to see what happens there. All right. So in this group date, I'm just sorry to say we didn't get to see more of Sandra. And what's the deal with Sandra in the house? So when the women are at the beginning and they're all in the pool and they're doing that dance and singing, and Sandra's sitting on the side, and then the helicopter comes and she kind of pokes out. But then when they're all in the house and they're talking when Faith comes back from her date, there's no Sandra again. So I'm like, is Sandra really separating herself from all the other women? That part was a little bit disappointing. I got it last week. She was sick. She ate ice cream. She has lactose intolerance. But I'm just seeing Sandra as kind of separate from the other women. But that group date at the Santa Monica Pier, I've been there. It's super fun. That was great. And Susan, the Kris Jenner. Oh my gosh, I just love Susan. She is such a breath of fresh air. And the moment that really touched me was when Ellen is nervous. Her feelings are on the line, of course. She's saying, oh my gosh, this night is make or break. And everybody knows it. And here's Susan consoling Ellen. That's a secure, functioning person. Like, Susan has broad shoulders. She, to me, feels like a very strong woman, a very strong pick. And I'm so sorry we just didn't get to know more of Susan. She's the one cooking for everybody in the house, doing everyone's hair, doing the karate chop. He gave her that rose quartz because that was, her strong with empathy. I just love Susan, and I just feel like we got gypped. We just didn't get to know her more. And let's talk about Ellen. Ellen is just the sweetheart. She is funny and cute, and the pickleball. And I love Ellen's spirit. But as I said last week, it just is reading friendship vibes. And I'm glad she went for it, though. I'm glad she told Gerry she was falling for him. And here's the thing, what I love about the show. When she said, she's in the limo now, and now we get to the final rose ceremony, and it's a big dun-dun-dun. We know Faith has got a rose. Leslie gets the rose, no surprise. And then Theresa gets the last rose, which I've always said is just a little bit tricky on the last one. But now we have Ellen and Sandra and Susan that we have to say goodbye to. 3 wonderful women. And what I loved about Ellen is she's in the limo and she says, that's enough. I can't say anything more, though they're sitting on the bench. And then she says,
this experience has been one of the best experiences of my life.
This is why I love the show, because people can learn a lot about themselves. They can learn that what she didn't say, like I've heard a lot of young women, they'll be in the limo and they'll say, I opened myself up for nothing. It didn't work. I'm so tired. I've been looking for love and it hasn't worked. And Ellen was just contrary to that. She said, this was a great experience. I learned so much, and good for me that I could feel that way again. And so what maturity for Ellen. Ellen, all these women would make the great Golden Bachelorette. It's like, I can't even choose. There was Joan, I love. There's Ellen. There's April. There's Natasha from the beginning. Sandra. Susan. I could go on and on about all the great women. Nancy. Great women who would make wonderful Golden Bachelorettes. I think there's going to be a tell-all. We'll see. In fact, I know there's going to be a tell-all. We'll see who is going to possibly be the next Golden Bachelor, though we've not seen ads yet, so that would take them a while. But that was really touching. These rose ceremonies are just going to gut us from here on out. I'm so looking forward to the families because for me, the families are the highlight. But I wanted to get this video out quickly because I'm going away for the weekend and it's late on Thursday, but here I am. I just want to put a plug in for know your attachment styles too, because if you can relate to the Leslies, to the Theresa, you feel a lot of anxiety yourself, dating gets to be a little bit harder. Try to be more like the Susan type, honestly, who's there, who's positive, who's putting herself out there, kind of having a little bit more of what we call the wait and see approach. That serves people well because if you can trust other people and trust the process, you don't make quite such emotional kind of reactions or responses, and you can just kind of stay the course with love. So I hope that's something to think about. I want you to come away from these videos with just a little bit different than just a recap, a little bit thinking about yourself. Where do you fall in terms of your attachment style? I said last week I have a quiz on my website, Back to Love Doc. Take the quiz. You'll find out who you are. Get on my email list. Find out about my courses because you too can become more secure. And if you're more secure and or you find a partner that you can become secure together, then love just gets so much easier. So I'm going to sign off now with my Golden Bachelor water bottle. I'm so excited about my new swag. You'll see me wearing it. And have a golden evening, day, morning, and I'll see you soon.